Hello and welcome to the Classic Car Weekly podcast. We're not at the NEC, we're actually back at our Peterborough headquarters doing this as a weekly podcast, as it should be for Classic Car Weekly. That makes sense. I'm the Titles staff writer, Jesse Billington, and I'm joined not by David this week. I've instead roped in two different members of the team. We've got features editor Chris Hope.
Hi guys.
And we've got managing editor James Sadlier joining us as well.
Greetings.
And we'll kick off with a fairly easy one. What are you up to with your classics at the moment, guys?
Well, I've actually sold one of mine. So the Peugeot has went off to ACA auctions, Anglia Car Auctions, and it's gone off to a lovely home, hopefully, for £1,000. And so, I'm just left with the Polo now. But that was the idea, that I was going to sell both of mine. So I'll sell the Polo at some point, which is still quite low mileage at 60k. And I'm going to get a bucket list classic that I've been... I've been wanting for ages. So yeah, I had to get rid of the Peugeot. It's just I'd had it for so long and felt like I'd done everything I needed to with it. And so yeah, just down with the Polo now.
Experience the joy of that French V6.
I should say it's a when I say Peugeot to any listeners, it was a Peugeot 406 Coupe V6. So not just any old Peugeot. And now I'm with my Polo Mark II red van.
Very nice. And Chris, what are you up to with the Mini?
Not a lot. It's sleeping, I think, is what I wrote down. Similarly, I used Anglia Car Auctions. I bought the Mini in June. Been sort of using it when the weather's been decent for just short trips to work here in Peterborough, into town, grab lunch, that sort of thing. Maybe sort of tennis on an evening, do that once a week. Did a few big journeys in it. So it's been to Stanford Hall for the British Mini Club's big bash event, Minifest, but it's also been to Withall Transport Museum. So throughout this year, Classic Car Weekly has been supporting a series of Sunday meets. They've drawn to a close now, haven't they?
Yeah, we're back sometime in the new year, I think. Once the roads clear up and the salt's gone again, we'll have those back up and running. We were able to confirm that at the NEC 2 weeks ago, last week. I've lost track of time.
Brilliant event. Really, really good. Courtyard just full of all sorts of different classic sort of things, so I was really pleased that I got along to that. Ever since, it's not really been doing a right lot. I'll be honest, sort of life events have been taking over. It sounds quite daft, but I'm really pleased I've got a shed now in the back garden. That means a lot of the stuff that was cluttering up the garage can now go in there, so I've got the room now to do a service on it. It's tax exempt, it's MOT exempt, but I still want someone to give it a check over. So looking to get that sorted. This side of Christmas is probably a bit ambitious now, but maybe sort of in the new year. And I've got a longer term plan to sort of install some rear seat belts. Got a 4-year-old, got a 1-year-old. They both love the car, but they only sort of see it standing still at the moment. Really want to sort of get some child seats in the back and get them along to various events that are going on, hopefully next year. We'll see how much of a big job that is.
Taking the Mini back to its sort of roots as a family car by seeing if you can shoehorn in the modern family. That'd be the real test.
Exactly.
What does the other half think of it? Jane, what does she think?
She likes it.
She's happy with it.
She's I think she'd be up for driving it, but she sat inside of it and went, what's going on with my feet? The positioning of the pedals, the driving in position in general, and having that like that bus-like steering wheel in front of you, splayed legs. It's a bit different to a modern sort of daily driver sort of thing. So I think she'll like it. She'll get used to it sort of thing. I mean, she drove my old TR7 when I had that. Had no problem with choke and things like that. People who aren't familiar with classics might struggle with. She sort of took to all of that. So yeah, I'm hopeful. Not the worst thing in the world though, if I have to drive it all the way everywhere though. So yeah.
Yeah, plenty of fun stuff. At least it's in better state of affairs than the MG, which is still Son's working engine. It's got one dead engine in it and one engine on a workbench that's now down to a complete empty block. So next thing I need to do is get all the sort of casings and the crankshaft honed out properly and balanced, and then start building one up from there. But I did spend a lot of time at the NEC running around all the trade stands, sort of going, would you be interested in supplying insert item here for the build, and seeing what I can get hold of. So we've got some interesting bits and pieces lined up for it, hopefully to prove if you can make the Triumph 1500 engine reliable.
And that's the real joy with that sports car, isn't it? Everything is available off the shelf. I'm not saying that you're getting everything off the shelf. You're sort of relying on sort of working with the club and things like that to get you the parts that you need. But yeah, it's great that you can sort of do that you can have access to all of that. I mean, 40 odd years now, isn't it? That car's been out of production, so.
Yeah, production on those ended 79, 80. I think the last ones were sort of sold through 80. They were just like the last ones to tumble off the line. I think the final editions are all done in black as well, though, if you can get sort of the final 500 in black. But yeah, the MG Owners Club are pretty good when it comes to supplying sort of parts and spares for them, and they've got a really well-stocked sort of online shop that you can sort of pick and choose from. If you get stuck, phone them up, and they have been great so far with getting bits together for it.
But no temptation to put in a trip engine?
I keep contemplating different engines. I keep looking at sort of thinking if I could squeeze in the 2-litre 6 from the GT6s, looking at going back to a 1275. One of the things that was floated was the 1.3 VVT engine from the Nissan Micra, the K11, because that bolts into the original engine mounts without any sort of metalwork or fabrication.
I did not know that.
Yeah, you then just need an adapter plate to mate it to the Morris Marina gearbox, and away you go.
Amazing.
And yeah, it's there are people that do the kits for it. There's a couple of engineering firms that make up the sort of pieces for it, and again, once you've got that K11 in, you can then chuck on things like bike carbs, independent throttle bodies, and it's a hell of a lot more tunable. It weighs less than the 1500 or the 1275 engine as well, and you can get north of 100 horsepower on stock internals out of it.
One of my friends had a midget. He had a 1500 as well, and he debumped it. I'm not sure that's the way to go.
I'm tempted by the debumpering thing, because I really like the idea of making it sort of semi-Sebring spec, because the midgets never officially went racing and that sort of thing. They're mostly run by privateers. I don't think BMC ever really sort of backed them hugely, but I'd love to do like a sort of scaled down version of the BMC sort of Sebring spec Bs, sort of completely share it of the bumpers, cages over the lights. I've got cages, like rally cages over the lights at the moment, fog lamps, and then look at maybe getting some sort of hand painted sort of decals down the side. I want sort of fast road look for it. I'm not precious about it as a car. That's the thing. I bought it to sort of drive, use, modify and enjoy. And again, at the end of the day, it's a rubber bumper MG midget. There's so many of them were produced.
Yeah, but you've got the perfect colour for it. I think if you're going to have a rubber bumper MG, be it a B or a midget, having something like Inky Yellow properly offsets that sort of black. I think you lean into it, you lean into the contrast, it looks the better for it. So I'd be tempted to keep them.
Yeah, because it does have the lovely satin sills as well down the side, so you've got that sort of continuity of sort of black sort of front, underside and rear. It sort of trims. It's one of those things that I'm sort of constantly sort of umming and ahhing over, but I do.
They look good, debumpering, especially on a Triumph 2000 or 2.5. A friend of mine debumpered his, and it just looks so much nicer. I never would have contemplated that. So, be good. Maybe I can get Photoshop out and do a little kind of test for you before you start unbolting.
You could do some renders. That'd be great. I do need to strip off the bumpers at some point, because the support bar for the front is pretty much dissolving at sort of the same rate that like icebergs are. So it's really not hanging around. And also the problem is those bumpers, the full set weighs somewhere around 80 kilos. So if you get rid of those, that's like removing me from the car. And 80 kilos in a car that weighs the best part of, 750? You're shedding over 10% of its weight.
It's you spread out across the car, though, isn't it, sort of thing?
Yeah, it's me sort of spread fore and aft. But even at the same time, when you're producing, 75 horsepower on a good engine, shedding 10% of the weight makes up quite a significant increase. But anyway, that's by the by. We'll move on from our classics to a bit of news, or certainly one of the news stories that caught my eye in this week's issue, which out now, is there was a moose that damaged a series of 80s BMWs when it broke into a garage in Sweden. Have you both seen the video now for this one?
Yes.
Yeah. It's surprisingly amusing, but at the same time you're sort of watching it, sort of wincing a little bit, and then you see a bit of the damage. But the question is, have you ever had any animal run-ins with your cars, classics or otherwise, just sort of animal encounters that have gone badly wrong?
Oh, no, I've run over a rabbit once, but that's about as bad as it gets. But the other one was self-inflicted. I took the Peugeot 406 Coupe to a safari park, and that's that typical thing where you kind of worry about your windscreen wipers. But had quite a loose side mirror at the time, and a monkey jumped on it, and it became a lot looser very quickly. But it was trying to get into the car as well, so it was good. But it was, like I say, it was self-inflicted. You take a classic to a safari park, what do you expect?
Yeah, you're asking for trouble. I don't think I'd take the MG through, but I've had similar with the Jimny actually. There is constantly a loose bit of trim in the roof guttering over the passenger side, where one of the Barbary apes at Woburn Safari Park piggled it loose, and I have been unable to glue it down. Whatever I've tried to glue it down has never stuck it back down, so it's got this sort of permanent cowslick quiff of just black trim stuck up.
Mine the same as Woburn as well, and it was. We'd stopped, the whole line of traffic had stopped, and I was like, I just needed to keep moving. Yeah, it's one of those things where you're going, I hope that's not going to be expensive damage. I mean, I've also hit a Blackbird in that car, and the Jimny's famous because it's got the little 5 sort of bar grille across the front, and turns out at motorway speeds a Blackbird has about the same structural integrity as a brick, so it's just the same as throwing a brick at sort of 10-year-old plastic, and it just went straight through. Thankfully, again, just sort of Facebook forums were able to sort of procure a couple of spare elements and the little fir tree clips, so that went back in relatively easily. But again, you're surprised as to quite how firm all of a sudden a Blackbird can be when travelling at speed. Chris? Actually, sorry, saying that, yeah, I did have a problem with, again in the Peugeot, sorry Chris.
No, you're fine.
Very recently, I had a pigeon fly into my grill of the Peugeot 406, and I didn't really know what happened to it. I just heard this clunk, I saw all these feathers, and I thought that was by a pigeon. About a couple of minutes later, the pigeon flew out of the grill. It had been in there, heating itself up, probably a little bit fried, and then the pigeon flew off. I don't know if it survived after that, but annoyingly, the grill was it had a black kind of outer fascia to it, which had to be glued back on. It was a bit banged up, but that's the other incident that happened. But I was thinking, of all the places to decide to land.
And you made sure that was in Anglia Car Auctions description. That was something that got fixed.
Yeah, I think I might have left that bit out. But the grill was in the boot, so it was obvious that the grill was no longer part.
Yeah, no longer firmly attached to the vehicle. It comes with the car, just not where you expect it to be.
Yeah, arguably, I was lessening the weight, like I would like.
Weight reductions. Yeah. Chris, any animal encounters that have not gone well for your cars?
Yeah, kind of. I'll go with one that didn't go well. So I bumped into the back of a snail.
A snail?
A snail, yeah, a tin snail. So Citroen 2CV. As I said, cheating a little bit. This was ages ago, probably more than a decade ago now. But yeah, I was in a hire car of some sort on a photo shoot with a company I used to work for. There was a Citroen 2CV that was taking part in the photo shoot in front of me at a T-junction, looking to edge out into traffic. And I made the classic error of expecting him to move out, and he didn't, so I went straight into the back of him. So, that wasn't great. I mean, the hire car was perfectly fine, but the poor guy, his boot lid was stoved in. And it wasn't really the damage to the car that was the issue. It was the fact that boot lid was covered in various stickers from European events that he'd been to, real sort of sentimental value. I felt so guilty. So, the cost of fixing it was sort of nominal. It wasn't any sort of great big deal sort of thing. But yeah, I think he did manage to sort of pop it back out again. And it again became part of that car's story, the rookie sort of journalist that drove into the back of me. But yeah, that was a real gut wrencher at the time. So yeah.
I mean, you were telling me earlier in the office about the time 2 horse riders interrupted an Austin Healey shoot as well.
Yeah. So yeah, this was on Classic Car Weekly. It was down on the south coast. We'd organised, I can't remember for what feature it was, but it involved Austin Healey. So we had a Frog Eye Sprite, we had a 106, and we had a 3000. Just looking at that sort of. Looking at that group of cars, that line of sports cars, found a nice leafy sort of spot in a corner of a sort of a gravel car park, parked the cars up in a group of 3. Didn't realise that at the time there was a path that led straight into that area, and yeah, 2 riders arrived in full gear, and rather than doing the sensible thing and going round our photo shoot, decided to go straight through the middle of it. So yeah, gritted teeth while they passed through, sort of thing, for fear of a kick out or something along those lines. But thankfully that didn't happen. But yeah, it looked like almost like a 1970s sort of BL photo shoot, aspiration with horse riders and expensive cars, sort of thing. So yeah, that was a funny one as well.
You can imagine the shot. BL made some fantastic sort of weird promotional stuff. I know I've got one of the original advertising books for the MG sports cars in period. It came in sort of like the packet of bump that you get whenever you buy a car second hand, and there's a great shot of a yellow rubber bumper MG midget which is sort of parked up in a workshop that's being used to strip down and rebuild what looks like a sort of Formula Ford racing car, like a lower tier single seater. I'm like, what on earth's it doing in there? Like, who on earth does that? And then sort of not long after I bought the car, my mate phones me up and goes, oh, when you've got chance, I'm rebuilding my Formula Ford racing car. I'm going, okay, hang on, there's an interesting trend here. I've got a picture that matches this. But yeah, I mean, there's some fantastic imagery in that book because it comes from the late 70s. So there's even a picture of an MGB Roadster parked up at a poolside in someone's back garden. There's no clear way of how the car got in there, but there was also a man in the tightest, shortest swim shorts you've ever seen featuring in this imagery. And you're sort of going, I don't think that's selling me on buying an MGB, but yeah.
Maybe that's where Oasis got the idea for putting a Rolls Royce in the pool.
Yeah, I mean, obviously commonplace when it came to sort of publishing material was you can buy an MGB, you might also have a pool in your back garden. Or a man with an incredible amount of chest hair and some very tight swim shorts. But again, 70s style, it wasn't for everyone. We'll move on to something else that features in the news section of this week's issue, which is, of course, a report from Brussels. James, you were there. How was it?
Yeah, it was fantastic. It's my first time at Interclassics in Brussels. And yeah, a wonderful location. You walk in to a central hall straight away, quite a big central hall, and then it branches off into small halls around it, so it's very easy to get around. It's not too big, not too small, and they were celebrating, a big celebration was 110 years of Maserati, and yeah, they celebrated it in style in this lovely kind of really well lit museum-like timeline from 110 years ago, from all their incredible races that are, innovative races and cars and road cars that have made them famous over the years, and some really kind of unique models in there, some prototypes, a 1 of 16 1993 Maserati Gran Trofeo Barchetta, which was gorgeous and certainly had a lot of the kind of, as they would say, young timers drawing a bit of an interest. And yeah, it's fantastic, even down to the 300S that Sir Sterling Moss raced, and the 250F that Fangio drove as well. So it was amazing.
Yeah, it's a historic mark when it comes to motorsport. It's not in Formula 1 these days, but is in Formula E, oddly enough. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Maserati is one of those brands that you sort of forget quite how historic it is. You sort of go 110 years and you sort of wind back the clock. That takes it back to the early 1900s.
Yeah.
Dawn of the motor car period. But were they producing motor cars through that point, or were they sort of just doing engineering bits for other people?
They were with another company, and then the three brothers branched. I think it's three brothers. Yeah, Maserati brothers branched off on their own to produce the 1926 Tipo 26, which was on display, and that was from basically 1926 onwards is when where the cars were. It started from on this particular exhibit. So
yeah, I'll throw you a curveball question, one that I didn't put in the show notes. Then, if you could have any Maserati from across the company's production, which one are you going for?
Ooh, go for you first, Chris.
I think it's already been sort of discussed, but Quattroporte, the 5th generation one, definitely.
Ooh, so from the noughties, very nice. James, if we're gonna push you to make a decision, which Maserati from all of the company's history?
If I could have anything, I would have the Gran Trofeo Barchetta, even though there's only 1 of 16, but it had this open top kind of, open top kind of cabin. It was a racer. It was absolutely fantastic. Loved it.
I think for me, I'm going to go for the Kyalami. Really sort of underappreciated car, but occasionally they pop up on the auction circuit and they are absolutely beautiful. And everyone goes, oh, what was it named after? Race Circuit in South Africa. It's one that I keep banging on about, needs to return to the F1 calendar. But yeah, everyone sort of goes, oh, the Quattroporte, the Gran Turismos, the sort of luxurious, sort of very obvious choice. I'm like, no, for me it's the Kyalami. I don't know why. For me, it's very sort of mafia boss sort of slinking around in some sort of giant Maserati. But for me, that's the one that always sticks in my mind.
But
yeah, they focused as well on the Citroen's kind of hydraulics as well, you know, and the kind of the relationship that they built with them for, you know, having those hydraulic expertise.
what, for like the SM?
Yeah, basically they had an SM on display
Did they?
actually right next to some of the lineup.
Yeah.
But that must have been. But it wasn't all about Maserati at Brussels. There was so much on offer. It was huge for cars for sale. I mean, they had a lot of traders there, and they were selling cars as quickly as they could kind of go back to their kind of premises and bring another one the next day to fill the gap of selling one. It wasn't that they sold one and it sat there for the whole 3 or 4 days.
If you went in and
someone
bought
would
it.
collect it and they'd have to go and get another one.
Yeah.
And there's an amazing variety of cars for sale. So it was a real buyer's kind of car show. But for me, one of the highlights, I know this is going to sound a bit bizarre, but there was an early 2000s Smart 4.2 that was the last car owned and driven by the late Sir Roger Moore around Monaco. So if you can imagine him, James Bond in a smart car, which
Can he get inside one of those? It feels like it's sort of car he'd probably fold himself into.
I did sit in it, and it's actually got a surprising amount of space on the inside. But yeah, he was quite. Yeah, I think he enjoyed kind of cruising around Monaco and that. It's quite a bizarre image, I know.
I mean-
And I'd already interviewed the chap selling it at the time on the stand, and I was talking to a one owner from new NSX that was priced at about 150,000 euros. Like, kind of, it was almost factory fresh NSX. It was gorgeous, and the chap I just interviewed about the Smart 4.2 rocked up behind me and said, "Would you like to come and meet a Bond girl?" And I said, "No. I guess if I have to, yeah, all right, then I'll come and chat to her." And one of the Bond girls from Moonraker was there helping to sell Roger Moore's Smart 4.2.
Of course. Naturally.
And they're obviously there to meet fans. And her name was Diana Thierry Meg. She was one of the space station girls in Drax's Space Station Girls at the end of the movie. And so that was quite an experience, and got to chat to her. And
Bet you weren't expecting that happening when you flew out.
No, not at all. So yeah, it was quite good. Yeah, so I was kind of chatting to her for a bit, and she had some interesting tales about Roger Moore. Apparently, when they were on the set, Roger's wife was there and wouldn't allow any of the girls to come and chat to him, and there were quite a few around at the time. So. But she said the actor who played Jaws, I can't remember his
Richard
name.
Kiel.
Richard Kiel, apparently he was the loveliest guy you could meet. He might have been the villain and inflicted fear into the audiences, but apparently he was such a gentle giant.
Richard Kiel, a man that certainly wouldn't fit in a Smart 4.2. He was 6'7", something
Yeah.
ridiculous. He was fantastically tall.
I mean, I've got this image of Roger Moore maybe sitting on and Jaws trying to bite into it,
Sort of like the old, was it the Bedford van, or that they tore apart in Fiora? No, the Spy Who Loved Me. Yes,
Loved Me,
in
yeah.
Egypt. Yeah, they absolutely, where Richard Kiel literally sort of physically rips apart a van.
Yeah.
Him doing that to the interchangeable panels on the Smart 4.2, because it simply takes. That would be a great advert, actually. Richard Kiel tearing one apart as Jaws, and then simply refitting a different set of body colours. Because that was like one of the options you could have from Smart, was you'd sort of take it back and they'd swap the colours for you.
Yeah, and this one in particular, obviously being Sir Roger Moore's Smart 4.2, it had every option on it, and then you had the privilege of buying a car that was you were sitting in James Bond's seat basically.
I mean, did he have any extra additional options fitted, as sort of Q branch options fitted?
I did ask, actually. I
Oil
said, well, when I got a few photos of Diana, the Bond girl from Moonraker, sitting in it, and I said, I don't think that's an ejector seat, so I think you're safe. But she said, well, you never know. You might do.
I mean, it's a small little city car. I'm trying to think what sort of space and packaging you've got to fit sort of Bond options to a Smart 4.2. It's going to be pretty compact if you do. I mean, best thing is sort of like rifle in the glove box or something like that, or ejector seat, because was it hard topped or did it have the little canvas top to it?
It did. No, it had the canvas top to it, I believe.
No, so practicality when it comes to the ejector seat.
Well, when you're in Monaco, you want to be able to see the blue skies, don't you?
Yeah, sort of roof down, enjoy sort of the atmosphere of it as you're puttering around in your tiny little.
I mean, you look at some of the cars. It's a bit different to say, the Sean Connery
era where he was all, you sort of, everyone remembers Sean Connery in an Aston Martin DB5, but Roger Moore was kind of, he had his, I can't remember which Renault it was in Paris.
View to a Kill. It's a Renault 14,
and that was chopped in half.
Yeah, it loses its roof and then it gets bisected all the time. Well, it was the stunt driver Remy Julien did all the driving for that, wasn't it? Famous stunt driver.
That's right. Yeah. But I remember Roger Moore in a 2CV down the side of a hill destroying that, but everyone remembers him in the Esprit.
Well, actually, no, it's not Roger Moore driving the 2CV. Funnily enough, it's actually the sort of Bond girl of that film franchise.
It was, wasn't it?
Yeah,
actually,
I think it's Melinda Havelock, I think is the character name.
Know that from the research you did, because you did the drive of a limited edition 2CV.
Yeah, of one of the 007 ones. They are
complete with stick-on bullet holes.
Yes, and I still really do enjoy the 2CV and do quite fancy one of those ones. But yes, I think for the film they uprated the engine for its own driving scenes, and for the rest of it was on a trailer. But yeah, it was
the 2CV.
The 2CV, when they were filming it.
It does make you realise how robust they actually are. Although my mum had a 2CV back in the day, and she used to tell me how they were driving along the motorway once, and they saw a wheel out in front of them that would come off someone's car, and they said, "What's that? Someone's lost a wheel over there." And then her and her then boyfriend realised it was their wheel off the 2CV that had come loose and was flinging down the motorway in the lane in front of them. So
it was doing a Citroen DS impression.
Yes, look, I can go with only 3 wheels.
That's basically maybe an example of bad maintenance. Okay.
Rather than an inherent design feature.
I was chatting to PC editor James Walsh, and he said when they produced them in France, to sort of move them down the assembly line, they'd simply roll them onto their roof and just slide them down a slightly greased piece of concrete, just sort of through the factory line, because that was the easiest way to move it around, save having to build up like a full mechanized production line. So they'd just really roll it over, slide it along. So many of them came out with slightly sort of warped roof lines where they'd just been rolled over and just slid along. So they were sort of built to be purposefully hardy. But anyway, we'll move on from 2CV.
All I was going to say was, you mentioned the NEC at the top of the podcast. I think it's just fantastic that, for a long time that was billed as being the season closer of the classic car hobby. If you do extend your sites beyond the UK, there are European events that you can go to, and it was straightforward to get to, not especially expensive. So, and it sounds like there's some fantastic cars.
It was really easy to get to if you're not far from London, and you can kind of
jump on the Eurostar, and it takes
an hour and a half, 2 hours on the Eurostar, and then from there it's just a very easy subway ride away. It was a brilliant show to go to. Recommend it. And Interclassics do another one in Maastricht,
which I'm off to next year. Is it January, February time? I think it is.
Yeah.
The sort of Dutch equivalent, isn't it? Essentially,
yes.
a couple of doors down in Europe.
Lovely city, apparently. I've been told by the press people at Brussels.
So now I've got to try and convince David to give me at least 2 days there, so I can enjoy a bit of the city while I'm there. Or certainly, if you
good luck.
A bit longer than the 2 days we had in Classic Le Mans.
It wasn't even 2 days. It was 36 hours to cover a 4-day event, which was pushing it. We'll get to that on certainly another time we recant some stories, but we'll move on to a bit of auction window shopping. Of course, one of the big bits we cover in each week's issue is a preview or review of the auctions that are happening. And coming up, we've got an auction from H&H and one from Hampson. So I've set the two of you the challenge of filtering through their catalogues and finding me your dream drop top cars, a family runabout, and a classy coupe. So
the challenge was trying to pick, though.
Yeah,
there are some great cars in those lineups.
As in there was too many.
Yeah.
It's
a huge set of sort of catalogues coming through. So we'll start with the drop top option, and Chris, I'm going to start with your drop top pick.
Yeah, so we've gone with a dream drop top. So a dream of mine is to do the Mille Miglia, and you can absolutely do it with my pick. So it's a 1958 Mercedes-Benz 190 SL. Dream price as well, so up for with an estimate of £70,000 to £90,000. Left-hand drive, restored in the noughties, and it's been maintained ever since, and still presents well according to H&H. I mean, what really sort of shocked me was how frequently 190 SL seemed to come to auction. So, Iconic Auctioneers at the NEC sale, they sold an example for £104,000. H&H sold one last month for £168,000, which they described as one of, if not the best, right-hand drive example left of the 562 that were made. So obviously, you know, that estimate that I mentioned, a little bit lower than some of those cars. It's been subject to an extensive resto though. Looks very, very smart. I can see myself sort of driving around Italy in that.
Yeah, really nice, a very enjoyable choice. James, your choice for dream drop top?
Oh, see, I have some strange dreams, Jesse. I won't go into those right now, but my dream car is it is a drop top.
Yeah.
It is, and there's one from each auction, actually, the same car from each auction, Hampson and H&H. The first one is a 1990 Ford P100 V8. So it is a drop top because you are
stretching the term.
No, but it is though. If you're
Right, hang on, whoa. I'm going to have to pull up the catalogue and have a look at this one. This
Okay.
was from Hampson, yeah?
yeah. So no, the first one, one's from Hampson, one's from H&H.
So when I was growing up, my mum and stepfather had a Subaru pickup, the Subaru Brat type pickup.
Oh.
So I was always sitting in the back. This is when, you know, the legalities of sitting in the back of a pickup on a motorway were fairly new.
No Chelsea's for you.
Yeah, I just basically rolled around the back. So I'm used to sitting in the back of a pickup. So for me, that's my version of a soft top. I've always wanted a P100, you know, based on that kind of Sierra kind of. Okay, just for listeners, both pretty much Chris and Jesse have their heads in their hands at the moment.
Oh, it's not heads in hands. It's looking at the auction website.
So okay, let's talk about the first one. H&H. It's a V8 custom overhauled with a Rover V8 3.5 litre engine and a 5-speed gearbox and a Ford XR4i rear end, honed for drift racing. Okay, that in itself is fairly interesting. That from H&H. Would I want that one? Definitely. But Hampson are offering a Ford P100 that's only 12,500 miles from new, completely preserved, wax oiled, and through lockdown during the pandemic, it had another major refresh. And it's kind of a real time warp example. And that's the one I'd go for. I love the idea of having, you know, the V8 from H&H and having a bit of fun with it, but you know, I love that P100 from Hampson.
It's no reserve as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're looking at the Hampson one?
Yeah, the Hampson one.
Yeah, so the
Original bill of
there is
sale.
no reserve on that one. I didn't look too far into the V8.
So it's got like the sapphire appearance, hasn't it? So,
it has. I mean, it's essentially a Sierra Sapphire Sierra front end with that the facelift front end with a pickup loading
rear end.
With the
I mean, is this also your family runabout?
yeah, if your answer is
it could be a family runabout.
Have you tried to sort of pick one car to do all three?
It does work in that. I don't think I'd be allowed to take anyone in the back these days, but
like
I don't
last in the
know.
summer
I like
wine.
the idea of I love pickups. I know Jesse, you like pickups too, and it is an open top vehicle if you're in the back.
Yeah, open top vehicle if your definition of being is a hay bale. A ladder. It's
okay.
it's stretching it. Right, we're gonna go back to the realms of slightly more normal. I'm gonna go for my drop top pick. So 1964 Chevrolet Corsair Monza Cabriolet from H&H. This was
Very nice.
deturboed for reliability and economy. They did try sort of filling with turbocharging in the early 60s. Didn't prove to be particularly great. This one is sat on some absolutely terrible looking wheels, but has an estimate of 11 to 13k, which I feel is a bit strong for a sort of an obscure lump of Americana, but it's a bit of me. It's sort of, again, it's America's answer to the 911, flat six at the rear, air cooled. they were a bit unique at the time, and then sort of for some reason GM went, well, what if we stuck a turbocharger on it? And you sort of went, you haven't quite nailed down keeping it air cooled and working yet, so let's not put boost through it. But for me, an honourable mention has to go to the Graham Chapman 1980 Aston Martin V8 Volante.
Yeah, I looked at that.
Expat conversion, 20,000 miles. Unclear though if it comes with someone following around clopping halves of a coconut together, but for me it is a fantastic car, and again it's one of those things that's for me driven by the James Bond series. For me it was which was the first Timothy Dalton? It was
no,
not Licensed to Kill. It was the other one, Living Daylights. Because he has a Volante V8 at the start of it, which then gets winterized and fitted with skis, a rocket launcher, and so on and so forth. But yeah, for me, that series of Aston Martin, the V8s,
gorgeous.
the Vantages, the Volantes, they are stunning cars. And yeah, if money comes up, if my lottery numbers come up, I think that's certainly one of the cars that will always appear in my sort of I would have one of those lists. But for a reasonable buy, the Corsair Monza is quite a fun and unique pick as well. You're never going to see another one of them on the UK roads, or very rarely.
What's the estimate on that?
The Corsair, 11 to 13,000, which is...
Yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah. For getting 60s Americana, you're not getting much else for around that money, certainly not in that condition. I mean, I say that, my eBay alert went off because apparently there's something else that's been listed under the name of El Camino. But again, that's me loving pickup trucks and Americans. Move on to family runabouts. So obviously classic car auctions are unique when it comes to listing cars. You're not going to see sort of your Renault Espaces and your Vauxhall Zefiras, but there's certainly a few cars on the lists that could be classified as family cars. James, we'll start with yours.
Hampson had a wide range of family classics that would suit me down to the ground, and it was really hard to pick this, right down from the a lovingly restored 1989 Ford Orion 1.6 gear, which was, me, I love
I
my
knew you were
Fords.
going to mention that.
And it's gorgeous. It's so nice. Although the one thing about the Orion, absolutely lovely. It doesn't have as much space as the Sierras or the Granadas or Scorpios at the time.
Well, it's Escort based, isn't it?
Yeah, it's slightly bigger. It's that kind of in-between kind of Escort and Cortina or Sierra.
Escort for the people who didn't want an Escort with a hatchback, wasn't it? So
yeah,
the traditionalists.
Yes, yeah, and then there was the 2006 Maserati Quattroporte, which was lovely. I'm all about Maserati now. After I've been to Brussels, every time now I find myself looking for Maseratis for sale, and so excuse me. Yeah, the 2006 Maserati Quattroporte. Those were the two honourable mentions for me. But for me, I've gone, and this is based on, most of this decision is based on having been to Goodwood Revival and seeing what some of the people, or families and friends, turn up in en masse, and what looks comfortable and lovely, and in this case very French. And it's H&H's 1968 Citroen DS21.
Oh yeah,
and it was it's lovely. The bodywork maybe needs a little bit of attention. There's some but everything else about it is gorgeous. And I went to a good revival obviously this year and the year before, and last year a French family rocked up at the revival car park in a Citroen DS, and everyone in the back, the two people in the back, had enough floor space for an entire kind of French buffet stretched out everywhere. There was baguettes, there was cheeses. I mean, it probably smelt a bit in there by the time we got to Revival. But there was also, and it looked like such a lovely way to travel. It looked so comfortable inside. So yeah, that's my family pick.
I can't argue with you on that one.
For comfort,
I'm looking at it in that lovely sort of electric blue shade. It really does look fantastic. 25 to 30,000 pounds is relatively strong money for that. But again, it's a sort of first of the turning headlight models. Palace trim was like their highest specification for them, so it's certainly a comfortable way of moving 5 people around. And again, if you get a puncture, you don't have to worry about it for a little while.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like I've got both of your approval with that one after the Ford P100 letdown.
Yeah, you've won us back over, Chris. family transport.
I've gone French as well. H&H, a little bit left field. If I was to say to you, European Car of the Year, 1966.
1966 European Car of the Year, French, what?
Renault 16.
16?
Renault 16. So, I've done a little bit of research on this because I've done a buyer's guide. So we're actually covering the Renault 16 in our December 4th issue as a buyer's guide. Reason being that it's 60 years since the first one was built. So back in December 2nd, 1964. Revolutionary car, absolutely revolutionary car. Revolutionary body style, two-box shape with the lifting tailgate. It basically set the blueprint for the hatchback as we know it today. Hugely spacious inside, really compliant ride, and it has that same Renault A-Type engine as the Alpine A110. So lots of boxes ticked. But what really sort of sold it for me is that it's a TX. TX is the top of the line for Renault 16. So 1978 example, what you're getting is a 93 brake 1.6 engine, 5-speed gearbox, electric windows, central locking on a 1970s car. I mean, hopefully it works. And this one was subject to resto work, totaling £8,600 in 2022. Estimate is between £9,000 and £11,000. I can well see it pushing that higher estimate. But I think even if you do, the TX trim is really rare, on an incredibly rare car anyway here in the UK. There are Renault 16s about, but you know there's plenty more sort of numerous family runabouts. So yeah, I'd be seriously tempted by that.
Ooh, those seats do look comfortable. I just flicked around to the shots of the interior and just looking at those front sort of seats, they're almost more armchairish than anything else. But I will say I forgot how weird the engine layout is for the R16, because the engine block itself is set so far back, and then it drives almost backwards into the gearbox, which is ahead of the engine, and then out to the front wheels, front wheel drive, sort of that French style. And then you've just lobbed the spare wheel on top of it as well. So it's a very strange looking sort of mess under the bonnet. But again, it's that sort of French quirkiness that's quite selling.
What have you gone for, Jesse?
I might have you both beat for performance. However, running costs would cripple me. It is 2005 Volkswagen Passat W8 Estate from H&H.
That's a bit out there. What made you go for that?
Well, it's the 8-cylinder version of the W engines that found home in Bentleys as the W12s and the Veyron as the W16, an engine that's just about coming to the end of its production. They've just done the last ever W16 powered car, the Mistral, the 280 odd mile an hour convertible version of essentially the Chiron. 277 horsepower, 270 pound-foot of torque, a very smooth auto box, and it's got 4Motion, Volkswagen's all-wheel drive system. Crucially, it's an ex-Japan car, so it's completely salt-free underneath, and all the paperwork is there. Indigo blue, black leather. It looks the business. You've got a huge boot for all the fripperies of the modern family, and yeah.
Well, you just said it. That's not a family runabout. That's a car for business. That's for getting a CEO.
But it's an estate car. It's the estate, so it's great for all the stuff that you need to sort of lug about when you have a family.
How many of those have you seen at the local recycling centre?
That series of Passats, loads. That series of Passats with 4Motion, a fair amount still. Them with the W8 in them, less so. It's hen's teeth.
P100 is suddenly looking like a great shout.
P100 you're certainly seeing at the local recycling centre, but most likely being chucked into one of the bins.
Excuse me, that's a gorgeous car you're talking about.
Someone's accidentally put it in household waste.
At least my P100 is a little bit more economical than yours, just putting that out there.
A little bit.
When something goes pop and bang on the W8, all of a sudden it's not going to be an easy thing to fix.
If you need something,
and I don't think a midget engine fits in one of those.
I don't think a midget engine would move one of those, certainly against the weight of the all-wheel drive system and the very low-slung automatic box. It's not got enough torque to move
probably need about 3 of them.
Spit the impeller of the torque converter, let alone actually move the car.
Well, maybe if you buy that and I'll buy the V8 engined P100, we can have a little bit of fun and have a bit of a race or something.
I was going to say, yeah, that'd prove an interesting sort of strangely V8 powered sort of drag race.
Yeah.
So try and see if we can whelk out some budget from somewhere for Classic Car Weekly drag races, but I can't see higher ups agreeing to that one. We'll move then to classy coupes, and Chris, we'll start with you for this one.
I mean, I'm going to disappoint everybody because I feel like I now need to give a choice that's completely out there and random, but I think I've gone sort of middle of the road again. So Hampsons, and I've gone with Volvo P1800S.
Oh, I saw that. That did look nice. Yeah.
No reserve, so difficult to gauge, and there's not any sort of information on there either, unfortunately. All I can really suss out from the image is it's on mini lights, and with that sort of gunmetal paint colour that it's got, it does have that almost resto mod aesthetic, which is quite nice. I'd want to find out more. I do love 1960s Volvos, but with the limited information, it could be anywhere between sort of, assuming it is roadworthy, assuming that it is in good condition, anywhere between sort of 13 and 28. So do some legwork, but you could have a really nice Grand Tourer there.
Yeah, that is I do really like the P1800s. They are such a nice coupe, because didn't one, up until relatively recently, or possibly still does, hold the record for most mileage covered in a single car in one ownership. There's
Was it an ES?
It might have been an ES, I can't remember, but it's that chap in America who lived somewhere on the East Coast that used it for commuting pretty much every day. He took it to sort of like 300,000 miles. Volvo said, well done, here's another Volvo. He simply put 1 trillion miles on that and then went back to using the 1800. They were like, oh, okay. Which was, again, great publicity for Volvo on the fact that they could supply him with 2 cars that would both do squillion mileage, and then
that's the point. It's not. It looks sporty, but it's not necessarily sporty to drive. It has that look of sort of swish, sleek.
Yeah.
But it's definitely more of a Grand Tourer.
I don't think they ever really went racing either, despite looking that sort of really sleek sort of aero style. You never really
it was the Amazon and the PVs that went rallying. So yeah.
And then when it went to track work, it was all stuff like the 850Rs. They were the ones that really went sort of like circuit racing. So it was somehow Volvo's sportiest car that never went into motorsport, oddly enough. James, if you're going to go for a coupe.
Oh, Hampson had too many to choose from yet again, and I was lusting over my honourable mentions are the Aston Martin DB7 and the Jaguar XK8. I mean, I've driven an XK8 to Belgium, funnily enough, and it was such a lovely drive. So yeah, those are easy ones. But my pick, it's debatable whether it's a classic auction, and I ask any listeners now to let us know whether you think that this has entered classic status or not. But I've gone for the 2011 Audi R8 Le Mans even.
Ooh.
Do you want to re-edit that bit and I'll say it again?
No, I think the argument I'd make is it's certainly approaching classicdom. Audi don't make the R8 anymore, I don't believe.
Don't think so.
They've stopped now.
Hasn't it?
Yeah, I know the last they were doing was the V10s, because they were simply just getting them from Lamborghini at the time.
Well, I'll pronounce this a little bit better now. The 2011 Audi R8 Le Mans is just one of 100 built, with only 40 that have a 6-speed manual gearbox, and it's only covered 33,000 miles. So it's a really good example. And
is it classy? I'd say does it have that classy image?
Classy.
I was going for classic status.
Classic status.
Okay.
Classic status. I'll award. It's sort of proto-classic. It's edging into it.
Yeah.
Classy. I don't know. The problem I always had.
What do you define as classy then?
Bentley.
What
Continental.
Not car makes or brands or marks or whatever. But what is it about? What defines a classy car or a classy coupe?
Will it impress your Bond girl?
An R8 definitely would do.
I think it would. What I was going for more was sort of where you would see it in society, and I'm going to have to phrase this very carefully, but much the same as the Audi RS3, you got a lot of people that bought them on finance, a lot of people that were just sort of oiks with them, and all of a sudden they sort of earned a bit of a burnished name for themselves.
Oh, so it's about ownership and the type of person that would be seen driving one.
When you imagine a Bentley, you imagine someone relatively classy, a lot of sort of well-refined, well-spoken, expensive education. When you think of someone in a modern hot Audi, you think of someone baseball cap backwards.
What are you trying to say about me?
Baseball cap backwards. You can imagine the type of person that goes with it, and for me that's one of the things that acts as my steer for it. I'm going to sort of avoid saying much more, because otherwise it sort of becomes a bit of a diatribe, but you picture sort of a certain person driving a certain type of car. It was always that argument of Saabs were always driven by architects, driven by sort of refined, sort of quiet types. BMWs were always driven by people who are right up your chuffer in the outside lane with their indicator on, flashing you to move out of the way. For me, the R8 never failed to break away from the standard stereotype that other RS cars always seem to earn themselves.
I think if it's going to be classy, you need to be able to delete some of the carbon fibre and add some wood panelling instead.
Yeah,
I was about to say that. Is it chrome and wood panel?
Oh, yeah.
Is that when it makes it classy for you guys?
Yeah.
In that sense, having driven an XK8...
None of it there on the Volvo, by the way, so
completely contradicting myself.
The wooden dash of the Jaguar XK8. All right, I'm not going to change my mind on the Audi R8 Le Mans, but I will. If I'm going to be classy, if I'm going to be classy, I like to think listeners will think I'm classy enough as it is, but Jaguar XK8 is probably more down the classier route. It's, then they're not that uncommon, but they are gorgeous cars, and they're normally, as you just kind of alluded to with how people drive these cars, you never see an XK8 kind of thundering along in the outside lane, trying to get people out of the way. You're normally cruising along.
It's never being driven.
The
by
world
an
waits for him rather than him rushing to.
Yeah.
And if you want to put your foot down, you know it can do it.
Yeah.
But so all right, I'll revise my classy status, my classy decision to a Jaguar XK8.
I'll accept that. So I went for an early choice for me as I was flicking through Hampson 1990 Jaguar XJS. It is sort of the epitome of sort of luxury, classy coupe. You could park it up outside sort of a manor house or sort of like Stamford Hall. You could park it up there and it wouldn't look out of place. The Audi would look a bit out of place parked up in front of Stamford Hall, I'd argue.
I think it looks out of place everywhere. The R8, I just love it anyway.
Apart from sort of at Le Mans or the Nürburgring, the R8 looks a bit out of place.
So unclassy that it is classy. Is that what you're going for?
Yeah, I'm just trying to redefine the classy status, really.
A bit like Jaguar's trying to do with itself at the moment. So I looked at the Jaguar XJS 1990, no reserve, though it's described as ripe for restoration.
Is it a 6 or a V12?
It's a 6, but ripe for restoration. Chances are it will bankrupt me more than my MG currently is. So my better option is the 2010 Aston Martin V12 Vantage.
I've a question, Jesse. So the XJS, the natural successor to that was the XK8.
Yes.
Do you, because I know you love an XJS, do you think that the XK8 is a regarded, or in your mind, to your view, do you think it's the right successor? Do you think it pays homage to the
I think it does
XJS?
Well. I'd argue that it pays better homage to the E-Type before the XJS than the XJS did. Because if you look at some of the styling, certainly on the earlier models, you've got the slightly sort of ovular rounded headlights, certainly around the tail, it's got that sort of really sort of tapered finish. Again, those round tail lights. It pays a better homage to it, certainly in its sort of roadster sort of drop top form. It looks a lot more like it. Even in the coupe form, you look at the way that sort of rear window sits on it, same as you would on a fixed head E-Type. It's got a little bit of the similarities to it. It's a perfect successor in the Jaguar sports car range. And even the F-Type, again, when you look at the styling of it, the way that it sort of, certainly the lines around the rear of the modern F-Type, the tail lights, again, you've got that sort of slight spherical bit that then tapers out. Look at the rear tail light of an E-Type, it is pretty much the same thing. Jaguar's sports car range, for me, is one of the best sort of successive generations of sort of sports cars and design language, because it was so contiguous all the way through. The XKR, the XK was the perfect follow-on from the XJS, which in itself, looking back now, has earned itself the great status of being a perfect follow-on from the E-Type. In the period, everyone went, well, it's not, but yeah, the E-Type by that point sort of got a bit bloated. The 3-speed V12 was...
The styling stayed the same, but its function changed, isn't it?
Yeah,
so.
Their function, where they sat within sort of the car hierarchy of the sort of the buying market, had changed a bit. But yeah, the XJS was perfect, and the XKR and XK followed it on really nicely.
I reckon we'll see quite a few XJSs next year, 50th anniversary, because obviously released in 1975, so... at various events, I imagine it's the kind of car that some of the big sort of national events would want to sort of pay homage to as well. And obviously, Jaguar breakfast meets and things like that, I can see quite a few of them coming out, sort of thing. I wonder what it means in terms of prices and auctions, and whether that exposure and that sort of reminder of 1970s cool will cause a bit of an uplift for these cars, because you can get XJSs quite cheaply. I mean, maybe, as you alluded to, not the best idea, but absolutely doable.
Yeah, if you're happy to do a bit of the work yourself, and that's why I've always wanted sort of the V12, and if you could try and get a manual transmission behind it, it'd be great. You'd have this sort of brawny V12 powered sports coupe. Then I was like, okay, but maintenance on that V12 is abysmal. If you got the 6, it's a really, really refined engine. It's relatively easy to work on, and again, you can go for the manual transmission. The autos on them, I think they used a GM auto on them as well, so getting boxes for them is relatively easy, especially if you know someone who can just pick out one from a junkyard in America. So it's actually a relatively reasonable classic to own and try and maintain yourself. But again, there's a wealth of specialists out there for Jaguars and all the Jaguar sort of models, that getting one back on the road or keeping one on the road isn't too sort of terrifying or sort of tantalising a prospect.
One of those classics where it matured like fine wine sort of thing. The later examples are really sort of nice. If you can get the
the XJ6, the AJ6 engine, the 4-litre one that came towards the end of production in the 90s. That's considered by many, to be, myself included, to be sort of the sweet spot sort of thing. So, and in coupe guys, you're sort of looking at £10,000 to £15,000, which feels like a lot of car for the money.
10 to 15 gets you a relatively decent one. You can, if you really shop around, certainly on sort of auction catalogues, find some that will go for below 10, but you're looking at something you're going to have to spend a bit of work on, possibly looking at doing sills, a bit of body work here and there. But they're a good classic. But this one with right for restoration on it made me think again. 2010 Aston Martin V12 Vantage, 22,000 miles. Aston's brawniest engine in their smallest chassis. It's a pugnacious little thing, and biblical noise. I think if you want a V12 sort of coupe, again for me, it's got this sort of, Aston Martin again has done very well for preservation of its brand, of this idea of sort of class and refinement, of sort of really holding itself to that. So sort of for a classy coupe, I don't think you can do better than the Aston Martin Vantage.
Agreed. Yeah.
Which is, I think it's interesting that we somehow managed to go from the Ford P100 to sort of the Audi R8 and the Aston Martin V12.
Shows the depth of these catalogues, doesn't it? So
Diverse range of choice.
Yeah, a great range of choice. But I think if we're going to pick an overall winner for each category, which way do we want to go? Because I think I can't argue the Aston over the P18. I think the Volvo is just sort of so timeless.
yes.
I think for me that would out of the bunch be my choice for
Which
the
category is this
coupe.
for, sorry?
For the coupe, I think I'd have to agree on Chris's decision.
Yeah,
for the
I
Volvo.
would. Yeah, absolutely, definitely.
And as much as I like the Renault 16, I think the DS is absolutely the shout for the family car.
Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
have to fight you for that. Well, I don't need to, but you guys agree. So, but I honestly, I couldn't think of a more family friendly.
As much as I love the wild choice of a W8 powered Volkswagen Passat, it's not a prime family car. The engine didn't even really. Volkswagen did some strange engine combinations that period of time. You had the Phaeton and you had the Touareg as well. The Touareg had that V10 diesel engine in it that produced like 1 billion pound-foot of torque. And everyone went, "Oh, that's great. What are you ever going to use that for?" I don't know. And underneath it was just a Porsche Cayenne as well, or they shared a lot of the same stuff. So surprisingly good off-road.
What about Dream Drop Top?
Dream
What's our
Drop Top.
favourite for that one?
Ooh,
Depends whether it's money no object. I think if it's money no objects, I think I'm good. But
Yeah.
your Monza does offer an awful lot of value for money, car for the money as well.
a lot of great, interesting sort of motoring history for the money as well. If you look at what GM were trying to do through that period of time.
I can't see it. It's 2 or 4 seater.
I think it was a 4-seater actually as well. So you've got a relatively decent amount of space in it. Let me
Let's
see.
say, I mean, Stags nowadays, Triumph Stags nowadays, you're looking maybe sort of 20, 25 sort of thing. This is like half the price.
H&H, this was the Monza. Let's see if it should pop up on the search. There it is. It is indeed a 4-seater. He says, flicking through the photographs, checking. Yeah, it looks like it.
Looks long enough to be. It looks like it has a
it
wheelbase.
is a 4-seater.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So,
yeah, and a
C-
family
Runabout as well then.
Yeah.
so CCW's choice is Dream Drop Top, the Monza.
Chevrolet Corvair Monza Cabriolet.
Family Runabout was the Citroen DS21.
Yeah.
And the Classy Coupe was the Volvo P1800.
Yeah.
Yeah.
P1800S, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think those
One
are
for
three.
each of us.
I think there's three pretty brilliant choices there, and it was hard to choose. And I appreciate me and a couple of others have gone a bit out there with some of our other
Why
choices.
not?
But hey, it sparks debate.
It sparks debate. The best part is obviously wherever you listen to this, there's probably an option to sort of comment on it or get in touch on the socials. If you've got a better choice for any of those categories, again, money no object, whatever's coming out for auction. What if you had the funds, if you had the chance, the space in the garage to buy something for one of those categories? What would you pick? Let us know. Social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or if you're listening to this on YouTube or Spotify, comment section. Let us know. It'd be interesting to hear your choices, and when we next come back, we'll perhaps have a look back through and see what you've picked. See if you've got anything that will topple the Volvo, the Citroen, or the Chevrolet. Other than that, of course, our latest issue is out now. There's all the full sort of preview of this week's auctions at H&H and Hamptons, as well as reviews from, I think we've got the review from Myconic at the NEC in there as well. Plus, of course, James's full report from Europe. And, of course, the usual spread of news that goes beyond a moose damaging some 1980s BMWs. So feel free to pick that up or, of course, subscribe, even better, to never miss an issue. Otherwise, gentlemen, we'll probably want to head back to our desks and get on with producing next week's issue. Chris, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And James, thank you very much.
Thank you both.
Right. We'll be back next week with another edition of Classic Car Weekly and the Classic Car Weekly podcast.